Hey, Elminster! Why is there a 10-foot cube of goo oozing slowly towards me?
Huh? Hold that. Don't bother it. It's cleaning. Just slowly walk in the other direction.
That's a weird thing to say, right? Hey, it's Tim here, your average dungeon master and your amateur bar master. Today, I'm going crazy and turning the gin martini into a gelatinous cube. Cheers. You know that I like to make original cocktails on my channel and also talk a little bit about tabletop gaming advice. So today I'm making a little bit of a modified gin martini, and I'm talking about the gelatinous cube. We'll start by making the drink, and today's drink tip is making clear ice at home. So I got a few rocks of ice here that I made myself because I know the recipe for ice, and I'll share it with you today. I like to use these large, clear rocks of ice for my drinks. So you see here that I've just got a small cooler that I took the lid off of. So I fill it up with about 6 inches of water, and then I leave that in the freezer with the lid off to freeze for about 34 hours. That's what it takes in my freezer with this cooler with that amount of water. What I'm trying to do is freeze half of the water, leaving the impurities down at the bottom because the water will freeze before the impurities will. The first 3 inches of ice will freeze clear, or that's the goal, and then the rest of the water at the bottom you can just pour off. Then you've got a chunk of ice that's about 3 inches thick that I cut into 18 cubes of ice. You're gonna have to experiment with your cooler and your freezer and the amount of water that you have to get the right amount of frozen water without starting to get cloudy. Even if they're not perfectly clear and not ready for the Insta. There's a couple benefits or reasons why you would want to use these big clear rocks of ice. One is they will chill your drink longer than small ice. The big mass of ice will chill your drink better and faster to a lower temperature and stay cold longer because it's got more thermal mass. Two, without the impurities or air bubbles in there, the ice is more solid and colder. Three, when you stir, I'll show you that the large rock of ice helps you keep the spoon in the right place in the glass. This way I can just stir over this large rock of ice straight in the glass and get my drink fast. Because you know, when I've got people over that want to play, I just want to get a drink out to everybody and start playing games. So we're going to take one of these clear rocks of ice because the goal here is for the gelatinous cube to be represented by my drink with the ice cube disappearing into the liquid. Because the gelatinous cube, as a monster, is intended to be this clear, transparent, stealthy presence in the dungeon that just moves through and picks up things and collects things and sneaks up on you. All right, we'll go ahead and drop my rock of ice in there. I like this ice cube to be a little bit bigger than the bottom of my glass. That's why I make it about 3 inches by 3 inches. That's perfect for this glass to kind of sit up like this. And as you'll see, when I stir, it'll kind of sink down into the liquid as the corners melt away and the ice cube sinks down in. Okay, so I'm making sort of a gin martini today, basically a gin martini, but I wanted to modify it a little bit because I like to mess with stuff. And I'm gonna start with 2 ounces of gin. This is my recipe for a gin martini. I know most recipes are an ounce and a half of gin, but this is my recipe. These ice cubes have been sitting out on this table for 5 minutes or so, and so they're tempered. They've, outside of the cube has sort of started to build up a layer of water as it's melted and come to room temperature. And so when I pour onto it, it won't crack. But if I brought these directly out of the freezer and poured room temperature liquid right over them, they'd crack. All right, now I'm gonna do a 1/2 ounce of Cocchi Americano Bianco. This is a sweet white vermouth, just a 1/2 ounce in my gin martini. I'm using the Bianco, 1, because I like a sweet vermouth in my martini, and 2, because I want my drink to be clear. All right, then I'm going to use something very unique here. I've been experimenting with balsamic vinegars in my drink. This is a white balsamic, and I'm just going to do a Barspoon. This is essentially replacing the bitters in my gin martini. That was way more than a Barspoon, but that's okay. So a gin martini would just be bitters. Experiment with all kinds of stuff in your drinks. There's no rules. No one's going to come after you. I've got the recipe built in the glass, and again, I'm a normal person who doesn't always get out a mixing glass just to make a drink for myself in the evening. It's so nice to have this large rock of ice in my cup because it keeps my spoon in the right place. It pushes the spoon to the outside of the glass. Also, you saw almost instantly that ice cube drop down into the glass as the corners rounded off. Now, gin martini is supposed to be ice cold, and you're not going to get it as cold doing this. That's the main benefit of stirring in a mixing glass with a bunch of shards of ice is to get it colder. But if I stir long enough, I'm going to start to build up a fog on the outside of the glass from chilling. I can already see that cloudiness building up. Yeah, it's just so nice to have this large piece of ice in here to help me stir. Really nice. It's really satisfying. I forgot to say that my gin is from Columbus, Indiana, near me. Drink local. Definitely buy local as much as you can, especially spirits. You can get a lot of stuff locally. This 540 North Spirits from Columbus, Indiana is excellent. I would definitely recommend it. Can't find anything similar to the Cocchi around me yet, but I'm always searching. I'm gonna peel a lemon and then I'll talk about the Gelatinous Cube. Cheers. Yeah, okay. Yep, I love a martini. The Gelatinous Cube, as you can see, my ice cubes kind of disappeared in there. You can just see the hints of some of the texture of the ice as it moves around, which is great because it represents the Gelatinous Cube perfectly. The Gelatinous Cube was created by Gary Gygax. Well, I guess I don't know if it was specifically created by Gary Gygax, but it was created for the first edition of Dungeons & Dragons. It's one of the proprietary monsters. There's a couple, like Mind Flayers and Gelatinous Cubes and other things, that are specific to Dungeons & Dragons, unlike dwarves and elves and orcs and things, which Dungeons & Dragons can't claim. However, I think the current edition of the monster is pretty lame, to be honest. Like a lot of the low-level monsters, I think they're garbage. I think you could do a lot better. Mess with your monsters. It's fun. So we want to look at what's unique about the monster first. When I'm home brewing something, I want to look at what makes that monster unique and cool and fulfill that fantasy through the mechanics of the monster. So the Gelatinous Cube, well, it's a cube that fills a dungeon hallway. That's the idea. It fills up the available space. So a 10 by 10 cube, which is the typical size, or was, of a dungeon hallway. And it moves slowly towards everything. It's transparent, and it consumes everything in its path. I think of the Gelatinous Cube as the wizard's Roomba. It just cruises through the dungeon, picking up all the trash and dissolving it within itself. So we want to keep the transparentness of the Gelatinous Cube. The Gelatinous Cube also doesn't have to stop and eat. It picks up everything and dissolves it slowly as it goes, so it's relentless. It will always be moving towards you. And it's just a cube of acid, basically. So anytime you touch it or it touches you, you should be taking damage. So the Gelatinous Cube that I would make and make for my home games is very hard to detect, especially in low light. It's basically invisible. The idea of a Gelatinous Cube moving through a dungeon full of bones, and it's invisible, but you can see the bones and they're just hovering towards you, I think is hilarious. Again, it's relentless, which should be scary. So your players might see a Gelatinous Cube early when they're in a dungeon, and they can just kind of back away from it and move away because it can't move very quickly if it's far away. But then they should see it again where they don't expect it. Maybe they're taking a short rest in the dungeon and the Gelatinous Cube is just there all of a sudden. And the players thought they were safe, but they're not. They have to move, okay? Then the players are maybe resting, trying to find somewhere else to get respite from this Gelatinous Cube, but then it eats through the doorway. The acid of the cube just breaks down the door and it just keeps moving. It's like those slow zombies that were always pushing in on players, not allowing them to get a rest. My Gelatinous Cube is also non-Newtonian, so while it can squeeze in and out of any size space, it only takes damage from elemental sources. So it's non-Newtonian. You hit it with a blunt weapon and it just bounces off. You hit it with a slashing weapon and it just closes its wound back together. You shoot a piercing arrow into it and it just goes in and dissolves. Doesn't do any damage. The only way you can hurt it is through elemental damage. And then again, it fills out the available space, so it can block pathways. It can force players to move certain directions or not move past it. And then one other idea I had for the Gelatinous Cube, which I don't know how you would implement it, but it'd be funny, would be sort of like the Kirby Gelatinous Cube, where it could just suck up an enemy and then absorb its powers. However that might be. It sucks up the wizard and all of a sudden it can shoot lightning. I think that's hilarious. Whether you're playing in Dungeons & Dragons, where the Gelatinous Cube is standard because it's one of the original monsters created for the game, or you're playing in some other game and you want to use the concepts of the Gelatinous Cube to scare your players, hopefully you can find something useful in my advice today. Cheers.